Hello everybody, welcome back to another video on this channel. So in this video I will actually be showing you how to make a game which you need a password to enter. So before I start this video, I just want to say when you're creating the correct code, you can't use the same number or letters more than once using this mechanism. I was going to show you how to get around this and use it more than once, but the video would be too long. It's already long enough as it is. So if you want me to make like a part 2 to showing you how to get around that, just tell me in the comments. But anyway, using this way, there's still a lot of combinations. As you can see here, I've worked out the formula. So if you had, let's just say 5 numbers without repetition, you would have 325 combinations. If you went up to 10, you would have 9,864,100 combinations. And as you can see here, the numbers just keep going up. So there is still a lot of combinations. So say if you had 20, you've got this big number that I'm not even going to try and attempt. So yeah, there is a lot of combinations still. I mean, like, you don't even really need more combinations. There's so many combinations. I recommend at least doing maybe 5 is 325, still quite a lot. If you maybe do like 8 or something, there's loads of combinations. So the chance of someone guessing your code is very unlikely. The best thing about this is that you can choose people that don't need to use the password to get into your game. So what this does is, if you don't enter the password correctly, it would take you back to a certain game. If you do, you'll get taken into the main game. To do this, you need 2 worlds. I have my world 1 and I have my world 2 down here somewhere. So you want to have your main game and then the game with the password. So world 1 is going to be my main world. I'm going to load the canvas template on both of them right now, and now I'm actually going to build a little house on this world. So I built my little house, and now let's actually go to the game which we will create our password, which if you get it right, you'll be teleported to the main game. As well, if you try to join the main game, if you haven't typed in the password, you will be taken to the password game, so there'll be no way around it. So what we're going to do, we're going to add a spawn down like that. Make sure that people can't access the spawn once they have been teleported to their place. Otherwise it can mess up the code. So you can just add a teleporter which teleports people away and they can't get back to it. How many numbers or letters you want, that's how many blocks you would need to add. So if I do A, B, C, D, E, that'll be 5, so I would need to add 5 blocks. The more blocks you add, the more possibilities there are, so it would be harder to actually get into it by guessing. So I'm actually going to do a number combination. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you want to add a stat for every single one. So you want to do stat add 1. It doesn't matter what the name of the stat is. It can just help you if you put the name of the stat as the same name as the codes you're working with. So I'm working with numbers 1 to 5, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to add a stat for every single one. So as you can see there, I've added the stats. If you wanted to do letters, you just do stat add and then the name of the stat. You can also do stat show if you have perms on the game, and you can actually see all the stats in the world like that. So as you can see, the stat 5 isn't showing up there. This is because too many stats there, but they are still there, but it doesn't show them up. So for how many stats you've made, you want to place that many blocks. So I've added 5. I've made them separate. You don't have to have them separate. So now you want to name every single block. Sign 1, sign 2, and then you can just keep doing this. There we go, like that. So I've named every single block. So this will be combinations of codes. So what you need to do now, make sure these blocks are separate. It doesn't matter how far you do them away, just make sure they're separate. You want to build 1, 2 like that. Build another 2, but delete this block like this. And then you want to build 3 up, 1, 2, 3 like this, and then delete these. And then you want to build 5 up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then delete the ones in between like this. So you've got this, and you want to do this for every single one. We will also be adding walls around these so people can't like jump out to the next one over. And now what you want to do is do a telly going from each one, so 1 going to this top one here, and then number 2 going to this one over here. As you can see the pattern, so 3 goes over here. So you want to do this for every single one. So when people go into it, they'll be teleported up here. You want to make sure you have all of these can collide off as well. So I'm just going to change them to can collide off like this. The bottom block can be can collide off or on, it doesn't really matter. So now what you want to do is build another set of blocks, go like 1, 2, and then do this for every single one. They don't have to be that far away, they just can't be touching each other. Make sure to have these top ones can collide off, the bottom ones can be cancelled on or off, it doesn't really matter, like these ones. So now I have painted the floor over here yellow. You don't need to, but this is just a marker so I know where people would be teleported when they go into one of these codes. So when they go into any code, even if it's right or wrong, they will be teleported over to this yellow block over here. You can do this by doing easy telly, hover your mouse over, press enter, and then you want to click all of these blocks down here and then all of these blocks down here like that. So say if I want this password to be 2341, they go simple password. So the first number or letter people get, you want to give them their stat when they first join, but you don't want them to be able to walk back and collect that stat once they've got other stats. So what I'm actually going to do is when they spawn, I'm going to add a can collide off block like this, and then do stat giver, and then let's do 2, and then let's give the 2 stat a stat like that. So when people walk into it, they will get the 2 stat. And then when they hit the spawn, they'll be teleported over to here like that. And then to stop people from walking back, we can just add a wall around it. Make sure don't add the roof like here or something, because people would probably just spawn on top of it if the roof is too low. So I like to just do like a big tube like this, and then once it's high enough, you can just add a roof like that. So now we need to add another stat, which would make it so if they type the code wrong, they won't be teleported into your main game. So we can do stat add. I'm going to name it fail like that. You can name it whatever you want, and then you want to do easy stat giver fail and then 1 like this, and then you want to click all of these like that. So what we need to do is do stat telly 2, which is the name of the stat, and then 1, which we have one of that stat. It probably would be clearer if I did letters, sorry about that. This is basically the name of the stat, and then this is the ID, which got one of them. So you want to hover over the 2, because I want it to start with 2 or whatever the number or letter you're starting off with. So mine is 2, and then you want to press enter on that, and you want people to be teleported over here like that. So if you've got 1 on the 2 stat, you'll be teleported over here. This will remove your stat, so you want to do stat remover 2, which is the name of the stat, and then the ID, so it's 1 like that. So that will remove that 2 stat, and then you want to give it the next number. So I wanted it to be 3. So on the same block, you do stat giver 3 and then the ID, so you got 1 of them. The reason why I had to remove the 2 stat is because if I didn't, that would mean that they can go into the 2 stat again and they wouldn't be given the fail stat ID. Okay, so as you can see, there's actually a limit to how many commands you can put on a block. These are fine at the moment, but for some reason that wasn't working, so we need to use multiple blocks. Make sure to have can collide off, and we're actually going to change it so the spawn is going to be up here. We can raise the walls in a second, so they'll spawn up there, fall down, and then we can have a block here which teleports people over to here like that. So we're going to do stat remover fail 1 on this block. Also, I forgot to say, between these 2 blocks, these are can collide off, and once you go through these blocks, it would take all of the stats off you that you had before and give you back your first stat, which for me, I want people to start off with the number 2 stat. So every time someone resets or someone dies or joins, it would reset their stats. So all of their other stats will be removed, and it will give them back their 2 stat if that was removed before. So it basically resets the whole entire code. So if we get all of these stats like that, I've just removed the stat. So if we get all of these stats, let's get the fail stat like this, and then if we reset, it would reset all of our stats. Okay, I didn't reset them, but yeah, you would fall through, and then you would hit the stats, and then you would be given back your stat, which we started off with, which is the stat giver that's there. The stat giver for me is 2, so I would be back on 2, which resets the whole entire code. So once you go into this with your stat 2, you would get the stat 3. So now, across from the stat 3, we want to add a stat teller here, 3 and 1, because it's in line, because we want to have 3 now. So if they've got the 3 stat, they'll be teleported over here. If they don't, they would just be dropped. Once they are over here, you want to do stat remover, and then you want to remove that stat that they got, so they can't go into, if they go into it again, they would get a fail stat. And then you want to do stat giver, and then the next code. So I want the next one to be 4, so if you want to get the correct code, it'll be 4 after this. So you do 4 and then 1 to get 1 stat. So then once you go into it, let me just go over here with your 3rd stat if you have it, you would actually get the 4th one, as you can see, like that. You might be able to realise the pattern that's going on here. So for number 4, you would do stat telly 4, and then 1. So if they've got the 1 on the 4 stat, they'll be teleported over here. If they don't, they will be dropped. So once they're over here, they will remove that stat, because you don't want them walking again and not getting the fail stat. So you do stat remover for 1, because that's the stat name 4, and then the ID is 1. And then you want to do stat giver, and then the next code. So I want it to be 5-1, like that. So they get the 5th one. So if I go into it with my 4th stat, like this, I would actually be taken, and I got my 5th stat now. So now on the 5th one, there'll be a stat tell you 5-1 here, like that, 'cause that's the stat name and that's the stat ID, and then they'll be teleported over to here. They would get that stat removed, there we go, like that, and then they'll be given their next number or letter stat, which is, I want it to be 1 now. So the stat name 1, and then the stat ID 1, there we go, like that. So now back to here, we can do a stat telly 1-1. So once they've got that 1 ID stat on that 1 stat, they will go over here, stat telly here, go into over here. So if they've got that stat, they'll be teleported. That stat would be taken off them. But now we're actually going to add another stat, which basically tells us the win stat. So we can add a stat called win, or anything you want to name it, and then we can give them that stat. So stat giver win 1, like that. So now we have it all sorted out. That is basically the video. So if they do the right code, they will get the win stat. If they don't, if they mess up on anything, they will get the fail stat. They can try put multiple numbers or letters in the code, but you can only make the code using 1 letter or 1 number each. So now we need to make the mechanism that decides if people have the fail stat, and if they do, they won't be teleported to the world, and if they have the win stat, they will be teleported over to the world. But if they have the fail stat, they won't be teleported even if they do have the win stat. So what we can do is do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like this. We can remove these blocks here like that. The reason why the top block isn't very high up is because these are to stop people finding out if they've got the code right or wrong. But with this one over here, if they will know if they've got it right or wrong, since if they got it wrong, they won't be teleported to the world. If they got it right, they will be teleported to the world. So we can add a sign here saying send code, like that. So when people have put their code in, they will go into it, be teleported over here like that. As well, make sure to have these 2 blocks here can collide off. Like this bottom one, it doesn't need to be can collide off or can collide on. It doesn't really matter, but just make sure to have these top 2 blocks up here can collide off so people can fall through them. So once people have been teleported up here, we can do a stat telly. So if they've got the fail stat, they will be teleported back to the spawn over here, which they will be teleported over to there if they have the fail stat, which would wipe all their stats so they can start from the beginning and they won't be teleported to the world. If they don't have the fail stat, they'll be dropped straight through, and then this will see if they have their win stat. So if they do have the win stat, they'll be teleported over to this block. So I'm going to add a stat tell you win 1 over here. So they get teleported there if they have the win stat. If they don't have the win stat, so if they don't have any stat, they'll be just teleported back over to the spawn like that. So then their code would get reset. So if they've got the right stat and they've done the code correctly, they'll be teleported here, and this would be where the warp is. So we're actually going to hop back over to our main world. Make sure to get the spawn, make it so it's 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks off the ground like this. Make sure to have it can collide off. And now we want to add a stat in this game, so if people have got into the game, when they reset, they won't be teleported back to the code game. So when people have done the code and they did it correctly and they come to your game, where you want them to be teleported to, you want to do the command warp location and then the name of the place. You can name it whatever you want. I'm just going to name it code, and then when you press enter, it would place that warp location where your mouse is. So if I do it here, it would put the warp location there. You have to be very careful about this, because the way we're going to link the worlds up is by doing the warp and then the ID of the name, then the warp location name. But anybody can do this. Anybody can go to their world, put the ID name, and then put the, if they know the warp location name, they can just put the warp location name and teleport to this place. So if you don't want the name to be obvious, maybe make the names like just any random numbers or letters. On your main game, you want to do the command ID, and this will bring up the ID of the game. Make sure to copy and paste this, because we're going to need it later. And now we want to go back to our code game. So on the block where people get teleported to if they got the code right, you want to do the command warp, and then you put the ID of the word, so your word that we just got, and then you want to do the location name. So remember, we called it code. You want to do your location name. So whatever you named it, you want to press enter. It would put it on the block that your mouse is hovered over like that. So if people walk into it, they'll be teleported into that place. The reason why this is so useful is because this doesn't teleport us to this normal spawn. It teleports us over here, which would mean if people just joined normally, they'll be teleported here and then they can be warped back to that world using the warp location. So if people try to join this world straight away, they'll be teleported straight to the code world where they can do the code. If people come into this world and they reset, they'll be teleported back into the code world. You can actually fix this by building the spawn 4 blocks up off the ground, and then you want to add a block underneath it. You want to add a stat for it, so then when people get teleported to here, they will get that stat. So I named it done. So you want to do stat giver done and then 1. So when people finish the code, they'll be teleported here. Also, you need to add a block on top of the warp location, because you can't do the stat giver command on the same block as the warp location because it just doesn't work. So then the block underneath here, we can add a stat telly done 1 teleporting to the normal spawn. So if I just delete this block so I can place it on there. So when people spawn into the world, if they have done the code, they will have the done stat. So we can press enter on this block underneath, and they'll be teleported over to this block if they already have the done stat. So they won't be warped back to the code world. But if they haven't got the done stat by doing the code, they'll be dropped through. Make sure to leave a gap here, and then you can do warp and then the ID of the code world and then the location. So I'm actually going to find the ID of the code world now. So now I'm back at this code world. I'm going to do warp location and then the name of the warp location. You can fit it as anything. I'm just going to name it food. It will put the warp location onto where your mouse is. So I want people to be warped to the spawn when they walk into the warp. So warp location food there like that. And then you want to get the ID of this world. Copy this ID. Go back to the main world. And then we want to do warp here, put the ID of that world, the code world, and then put the warp location's name. So mine was food, like that. So if they don't have that stat for completing the code, they'll be teleported to the code world. That is done. We can do easy hide decals to hide the decals, so if you don't want people seeing them like this. Also, you might be thinking, oh Stubbzy, there's this block here, we don't want this block. Well yeah, what you can do is you can change it to transparency 1, so you won't be able to see it. Can collide off, so you can walk through it like that, but it is still there with all the commands on. I forgot to say that these have to be can collide off, my mistake, because this is a spawn. So when people spawn in, you want people to drop through here. Remember, you can do easy hide decals on these, and make sure to add walls on every single part of these mechanisms. So there we go. I'm just going to add the roofs here like that. You can also add walls and the roofs on top of these ones down here, well we kind of need to, and the ones over there. Also, an annoying thing as a visitor, you can use the stat show command to see what stat IDs you have on that code, which if people know how to do this, they can see what stat IDs they have and they can see which code to go into. So to stop this, it's very simple. You can just change the name of the stat, so it doesn't matter what the stat name is. So you can do stat display, and we can change the 3 stat to high, and we can change it so it says high instead. So there we go, like that. I've just blocked off all of these. We can also add the roof as well. So now if you don't want people to see all of these stats up here, because you don't, it's a code, it's a secret code, you want to do stat display and then the name of it, and then put on if you want the stat to be displayed, off if you don't want it to be displayed, and get tells you if it's displayed or not. So I don't want it to be displayed, so I'm going to do off. You're supposed to put a space between stat and display, so stat display went off like that, so it's still there but it's just hidden. And then you want to do this for every single one. So let's go to 1, let's go to 2 I meant, 3, 4, 5, now let's go to 1, and that's the code done. And then let's go into it, and then we will be warped to the main game. And that is how you make a code that you need to put into to enter to your game. And then once I reset now, I would actually be teleported back to here because there's a stat telly, and if people just join normally without the stat, they'll be teleported to the code world. So say if I try to join the main world without the stats, I'm just a new person because I removed my stat off me. If I tried to join the world, it would just teleport me to the code world. So that is actually going to be all for this video. Press that big red button which says subscribe, like this video, and we will see you on the next video. Make sure to tell me if you want me to show you the other way how to make the code which allows you to use numbers and letters multiple times. So yeah, see you on the next video. Bye!